All right, guys, welcome to the show. There's a bunch of stuff to talk about today, so I'm going to lead in just a second with Cenk Uygur turning on Fetterman and absolutely brutalizing him. We'll talk about that. We have Trump is broadcasting to the world now in no uncertain terms that he's going to try to steal the election again. We can't say we didn't see it coming because he's saying it's coming. Then we'll also get to DeSantis goes after Trump on the issue of immigration and portrays him as soft. And Obama very clearly thinks that Biden is going to lose in 2024. There's a really interesting article diving into almost how Obama is trying to help out behind the scenes and pull the strings and direct the Biden campaign because he thinks that they're staffed with a bunch of idiots, potentially including Biden himself. And then there's a really devastating poll about political violence potentially coming to America that I wanted to share with you. There's some interesting findings there. So we'll jump into it here in a second. Everybody do me a big favor. Please subscribe to the channel. It helps out massively. It doesn't cost you anything. It's huge help in the algorithm. And let's dive into it. So look at this in Mediaite. What the fuck? Progressive Cenk Uygur absolutely trashes fraud Fetterman over Harvard, Israel, and, quote, turning into a Republican. So I believe Cenk went on a little bit of a tweet storm here. Let's go through what he said. Now John Fetterman is telling everyone how he's not a progressive. He rejects us and is now calling Harvard pinko. What the fuck? This is why people lose hope, because frauds like Fetterman. You work hard to get a progressive elected, and they turn into Republicans instantly. Someone should do a poll of John Fetterman in Pennsylvania. I bet his numbers went down significantly after he became the biggest cheerleader for the establishment, biggest supporter of killing innocent Palestinians in Gaza, and a huge backer of Biden. That's not at all who they voted for. Then they say, back in December, Uygur said the populist image cultivated by Fetterman was also destroyed, calling him a mouthpiece for the establishment. So this is all the way back on December 27th. Fetterman has gone from the last great populist hope on the Democratic side to worse than useless. He's now enthusiastically taken on the role of mouthpiece for the establishment, who attacks anyone challenging Biden or the powerful. Counterproductive loser, hashtag fraud, hashtag put on a suit. So what's been going on with Fetterman recently? Well, we all know after October 7th, Israel responded to the Hamas terror attack by leveling Gaza and killing massive numbers of innocent civilians and wiping out civilian infrastructure. And in the midst of that, Fetterman pretty much came mask off as hardcore Zionist and right-wing on the issue of Israel and showed zero concern whatsoever for dead Palestinian civilians, broadcast to the world just how much he loves Israel and how much he's on the side of Israel. So that was a kind of a crucial moment in Fetterman finalizing his heel turn. But we also have, he came out and talked about how on the issue of immigration, the left needs to grow up effectively. And they need to realize that not everybody who wants to protect the border is a bigot and this and that. And what was particularly interesting about that heel turn is that there's countless videos of him when he was running for office making a progressive case on the issue of immigration, where he would basically say, hey, man, this is a country of immigrants. You know, I have immigrants in my family, and these people are trying to come here to work hard and make a better life and pay their taxes and be upstanding citizens, and we should accept people. And because this is what makes this country great. And total 180. He literally would call himself a progressive on immigration in various events. And then now that he's in Washington, all of a sudden, he says he's not a progressive. He literally said, I'm not a progressive. So you have the issue of immigration where he did a total 180. To be fair, on the issue of Israel, I think he was always bad. There was a very corrupt deal that was documented by Ryan Grimm of The Intercept, where Fetterman's position on Israel, they wrote it up and literally sent it off to AIPAC for approval. And then AIPAC made some edits and sent it back to Fetterman, and then they said, okay, if this is what you want, this is what we'll go with. This is our position on Israel. So horribly, horribly corrupt on that issue. Horribly corrupt. And I think it's just the straw that broke the camel's back. The other thing that Fetterman did recently is he started going after James Carville for not being a sufficient Biden loyalist. Why? Because Carville makes the very plain observation that, I don't know, man, I'm not sure Joe Biden's the best candidate. I'm not sure he can beat Trump. He's kind of struggling and the polls are horrific. And Fetterman thought that was an egregious overstep and basically told him to shut the hell up, which, by the way, very good intellectual argument there. I can't believe he's making me defend James Carville. Do you realize how pathetic that is, that Fetterman has gotten so bad that I have to come out here and say, I actually agree more with James Carville than I do John Fetterman? So here we are. And I think Cenk is really highlighting the breaking point, or the moment that you snap when you realize what's become of Fetterman, and how this is a very, very constant career trajectory of a lot of people who go into Congress as lefties. And by the way, how does Fetterman get repaid for this? There's all these articles in mainstream media sucking him off and calling him a maverick and saying he has an independent streak. So notice something. Whenever somebody gets to DC and then they shift further and further right, what happens? The media's like, oh yes, maverick, glorious, independent thinker. But if it was the reverse, if you have somebody who goes to DC and then they shift further and further left, all of a sudden, the knives come out. And they would not call you a maverick. They would not call you an independent thinker. They would not write glowing articles about how people disagree with him and he doesn't care. For example, Dean Phillips recently came out in favor of Medicare for all. And soon thereafter, there were all these hit pieces because he's challenging Biden and now he supports Medicare for all. And so, he's not even a good Democratic player. This is a guy who has always been a centrist Democrat, always been a right-leaning Democrat. And then now he's running, and on some issues, he's gone a little bit to the left, and they smear him. Fetterman's the opposite. He got in as a progressive. He's shifting to the right. Now, all of a sudden, he's the darling of mainstream media and the darling of the Biden administration. So, look, Cenk is right. If you run as one thing and you get there and you change it, that's unacceptable because you are representing your constituents. You said, here's who I am. Here's what I believe in. Here are the policies I'm for. And then if you do a total 180, it's like you're a different person. It's like you are not the person that they voted for. And so I find it incredibly selfish, incredibly navel-gazing and self-aggrandizing to suck yourself off and act like you're special because you do the right-wing turn, which is the most common turn that's always done in Washington, D.C., because that's where the money is. And I think Cenk had enough, and he snapped looking at Fetterman, and I get it, because, yeah, you had a lot of young people, you had a lot of lefties who helped get this guy elected, and then he immediately turns his back on the same people who got him in there. Right? And I think there's also a lot of negative polarization stuff going on here too, where the left sort of viciously went after him when he had a bad take on Israel, and that pushed him into the arms of the right, who was willing to stroke his ego and tell him that he's special, as the left was dunking on him. Because of course, if the left dunks on you, then the right automatically loves you. And so now you got all these conservatives and all these centrists and all these goons who love John Fetterman, and he's just like, oh, who's being nice to me? I'm going to go in this direction, right? So, look, I don't really care how he ended up where he is. It might also have something to do with the stroke and the depression and the brain damage and the mental illness. But the fact of the matter is, it's unacceptable. You ran as one thing, now you're something else completely. And this is a thing that takes hope away from regular people. Because if you run as, I'm the next iteration of Bernie Sanders, which is what he did. He endorsed Bernie. He acted like he's the heir apparent to Bernie. He's that kind of a Democrat. And then you go in there and you flip. Yeah, a lot of people are going to be disgusted by it, and a lot of people are going to be turned off to politics. And the next time somebody comes along who's sincere in their left beliefs, people are going to go, why should I believe you? Because the last guy who did this turned out to be a complete and utter con man and a fraud. Now, I'm sure he doesn't see himself as a con man or a fraud, but, you ran as one thing, and now you're another thing, so you kind of are that. So, look, I think Cenk is right, that this guy's the problem. It's almost like you'd rather have a centrist Democrat who is open, honest, upfront, and has always been a centrist Democrat versus somebody who pretended like they were with you and then stabs you in the back and goes to the center. You'd rather have that, because then it's like, hey, at least you're coming as advertised. But with Fetterman, it's, oh, I'm your best friend. Oh, I'm with you on all the issues. And then I'm not. And it's like, if you're willing to do a total 180 on the issue of immigration, which he 100% did, what other issues are you willing to do a 180 on? How do we know you're not going to back off of Medicare for all support? How do we know you're not going to back off of supporting an increase in the minimum wage? How do we know? Look, only time will tell, right? And when we have certain fights come up over certain issues, we'll be able to know. We'll know. Did he also back off of his union support and all this other stuff? We will know when the time comes. But all the evidence now is that you definitely can't take a fucking word out of this guy's mouth seriously. You can't take a word out of his mouth seriously. And, yeah, people are sick of it, man. People are sick of it. And they're right. They're right to be sick of it. This is a tale as old as time. And then the final question is it a genuine ideological shift, or is he just following the money, or is it both? That I don't know the answer to, but there's evidence that cuts in every which direction. I'm curious what you guys think. Hey, y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop, and watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.